G'day all, Warwick Baines, the Subject Convener here again. Just a short video to step you through a few key things to think about when you're preparing for your first assignment, which is called Assessment Item 2, Case Study and Report. Now that's due 2nd of April, which is not that far away. And although it's only worth 10%, it pays to put the effort in now, because not only is it good preparation for the exam, a good mark in the first assignment, it could be the difference between a pass and a fail grade at the end of the session. The important thing to remember is that you're up to date with your studies as per the study schedule for the first 2 weeks of session. If you are, then you've covered all of the content relevant to this assessment task. That's the first 3 topics essentially, but particularly topics 2 and 3. If you're not up to date and you haven't covered those topics, then you need to get on top of that before you tackle this question. Okay, let's have a brief look at each question. Firstly, the question 1. As you can see, it's a pretty standard ethical case study question from topic 2. Now, there are a few ethical decision models in the textbook, but the question clearly states that you are to use the American Accounting Association, or the AAA model, to answer this question. So make sure you actually use that one and not the others. Just to assist even further, we have set out the way you are to structure your answer, so make sure you do it that way. And one thing, just one little tip in relation to that first subheading where it says determine the facts. You don't need to write every sentence that's up here down here. Okay, keep the facts clear and concise, and then move on to really the other sections which are crucial in terms of demonstrating your understanding. To get an idea of how you are to answer the question, look up textbook pages 100 and 101 as you can see on the screen, and that gives you some tips about what to consider under each of those 7 headings. And you can have a go at some practice questions in the textbook that also require the AAA model. Questions 3.19 on page 135 and 136 are good practice questions. And so you can talk to your lecturer about possible solutions. Just a few more things to think about. Now, both the required section, as you can see here, with reference to the Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants, and the marking criteria, both require reference to relevant ethical and auditing standards. Now, the key one, of course, when it comes to ethics is APS 110. It's not good enough to just to say APS 110. You do need to reference relevant sections specifically. Now, there's not an expectation that you reference an ethical and auditing standard in every subheading, but probably the key one where we'd expect it would be identifying the major principles, rules and values. I just want to draw your attention again to the marking criteria and looking at the high distinction standard, and most of the marks are in relation to answering the question, and so you've got to apply that ethical decision model and demonstrate strong and critical thinking, and you need to have extensive relevant references to ethical and auditing standards to get that high mark. You can see the other criteria there in relation to professional communication and resourcing, appropriate resources and referencing. That's important, but most of the marks are up here. Finally, in answering this question, you're advising Jimmy, not me, not your lecturer or anyone else in the question, so please look at it from his perspective. Okay, on to question 2. Now, this is a legal liability question which covers a fair chunk of topic 3. And you can see in the required section, it's always the first thing you should probably go to. You can see essentially there's 3 parts, and that's how you should structure your answer. So I'd like to see 3 parts to your question here. One is in relation to essentially negligence, whether Kingsley Reader's being negligent towards its audit client, whether Plummet Travel, the audit client, is guilty of contributory negligence, and whether Kingsley Read owes a duty of care to the New Zealand parent, which is a third-party liability issue. Now, similar to the first question, you'll note that both in the required section, with reference to case law and auditing standards, and in the marking criteria for question 2, where it talks about critical evaluation of the common law and auditing standards that are most integral or most important to making those decisions about negligence, contributory negligence and third-party liability, you must reference those when you're answering the question. Now, it may not apply in every part of the question. Certainly, I'd expect to see reference to relevant case law in all three parts of the question, but perhaps not reference to auditing standards in all three. But certainly, across the question, you need to have included both. And before you begin this question, it's really important that you've got a good understanding of the key law cases on negligence, contributory negligence, and liability of third parties. And they start on page 67 of your textbook. So make sure you're across that. And when it comes to practicing similar questions from the textbook, question 2.26 on page 89, that's a good one on negligence. Question 2.28, which starts on the same page and then goes over onto page 90. That's a good one on contributory negligence. And at the bottom of that page, there's a good question on third-party liability, which is 2.30. And so there's others in the textbook, but there's some to think about. Alrighty, I think that's pretty much it for now. The final point I want to make is to watch your word count. The question clearly says that the word limit is 2,000 words, so stick to it. There's a little bit of tolerance, but not a huge amount. Both questions are worth 5% of your final assessment, and I think they should be roughly 1,000 words each. So hopefully that's pretty helpful. If you've got further questions, please talk to your lecturers.